Good morning, everyone. Oh, this is Newark, y'all. So we gon' good morning, everyone. We're about to go do the, clap once if you hear me. But we're gonna do that this morning. First of all, welcome home. For those who are meeting for the first time here, it's always exciting. My name is Medina. I am the founder and CEO of Equal Space. What you've just walked into is a share space and incubator dedicated to Newark-based startups and companies that are calling Newark home. We call this our Tech and Innovation Center. It will be 50,000 square feet once completed, creating equitable access to resources for those who are innovating and pushing and investing in our city, and that's work I'm proud to do. This is a mission fulfilling moment. Oh. This is like the height of our mission is convenings like this. We will boast a 300-person event space when we complete this for this exact purpose, is to bring everyone together to talk about the initiatives that are moving Newark forward, and have it in one home in one space. So I'm so glad to welcome you all. This might be the first time you're here. Let it not be the last. We have access points for single founders all the way up to teams for 50. As you walk our campus, you'll see companies that are led by diverse founders, that have teams of 40, that are working in artificial intelligence, that are solving for X, that are doing banking disruption platforms. The point is to move the needle forward and keep us progressing in spite of what is a landscape not particularly built for us, but when was it? So the other part is that this is an amazing moment to welcome my mayor, but also to welcome Kevin, the Newark Philanthropic Liaison. He has been in our corner since we had this down on paper. The mayor's been behind us since we were like a dream. So I'm happy to have this moment. And if you need me, I wear a big hat for a reason. Please tap me on the shoulder. If you need space, I'm also bald. I get cold easy. But the point is, this space was built for you. And so it does nothing if it's just pretty. It does everything when it's this moment. So thank you so much. And I can't wait for you guys to experience what they all have planned for you all. Kev?
Thank you, Medina. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Callahan. I am the Newark Philanthropic Liaison in Mayor Raz Baraka's office, work under the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers. And a long time ago, about 6 years ago, Mayor Baraka was one of the early mayors who saw what was happening in Stockton, California, and said, if it's happening in Stockton, California, why can't it happen in Newark? And we embarked on a long journey to figure out how to make guaranteed income happen in the city of Newark. At the time, we were one of the larger pilots. We were able to raise private funds. We were able to use ARP funds and really make this pilot come to life with over $6 million, putting over $4.8 million into the hands of 400 Newark residents. And what we have here today are all of the results of that pilot that prove out a lot of what we were saying a few years ago when we tried to make it happen initially. So today is really a day of celebration. It's a day to reflect on what the pilot made happen, but it's also a day to think forward and think about what Newark can inform statewide, how we can build pilots and grow pilots, but also how we can infuse some of this idea of unrestricted cash into families' lives into our statewide policy frameworks. I do just want to thank a few people before I bring the mayor up. First of all, I want to thank all of our philanthropic foundations that were involved and helped us to make this possible. So that's the Prudential Foundation, the Dodge Foundation, the Victoria Foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Stadler Family Foundation, the MCJ Miller Foundation, Community Foundation of New Jersey, and of course, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. So Mayor Baraka was one of the early mayors that joined Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and they helped us to make this pilot happen in the early phases. Of course, Center for Guaranteed Income Research, who was here and who will be showing us the results. I also want to give a big shout out to Jessica Deborah, who helped me put this event together. It looks amazing. So give her a round of applause. And then I also hope that you will hang out afterwards. So we have two spaces. We have one space that is actually from a Newark storytelling cohort that has photos and poetry from people that were directly involved in the pilot. We have another room that has some videos that document some people's experiences in the pilot. So I hope you stay and check those spaces out as well. So without further ado, I'll bring up Mayor Baraka.
Good morning. Morning. First, shout out to Medina. Always, man. This place is very dope, brother. And just want to congratulate you. This is my first time being up here. The finished space is beautiful. I got to come back and hang out. Appreciate you always. thank Kevin Callahan, the incredible work that he's done for us on making this a reality. As he said many years ago, Mayor Michael Tubbs, gave me a call about the Mayors for Guaranteed Income that was happening around the country. I was super excited about it. I said, let's do it. We're going to do it in Newark. And a lot of people talk. I said, no, we're actually going to do it in Newark. And Kevin helped make that a reality. So I want to thank all of our philanthropic partners for joining and being a part of this reality for us, and obviously the ARP dollars that assisted us in making this real as well. So shout out to Joe Biden. How about that? But for investing money here in the city of Newark, and 400 families who benefited from that, and we get an opportunity to see how this helped families, and maybe we could talk about expanding it statewide and doing what we wanted to do, which is expand it around the country, making sure that people who needed it the most had resources, unfettered resources in their hands, dollars that they could spend on the things they needed the most. And the data shows very clearly that this had very serious outcomes in people's lives and their decision making. Put it right in their budget right away for rent, for bills, for housing, right, for food. Was able to reduce their levels of stress and their mental kind of illness, even because thinking about not being able to pay things that you need to pay, it can be stressful. And so all of those things came out in this, and so I'm excited about what this does. And I think it's timely that we talk about this now and we try to expand it now, and especially in an environment where the richest people in the world are trying to take food out of the mouths of some of the most struggling in this country and the world, taking food and medicine from people that we're talking about actually doing the opposite, giving people a foundation, giving them support, giving them an opportunity to move from poverty into a better life. And this is exactly what we should be about, exactly what we should be doing. And the best way to fight against the things that are happening now is to prove all of these people wrong. So thank you for the Guaranteed Income Program, and thank all of you who are going to see this to the end, to its logical end, which is to expand it around the state of New Jersey. So God bless you guys.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. So the rest of our morning, we are going to hear a little bit about the pilot and about the pilot results, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with our program manager and some other folks to reflect on the pilot. So first, I would like to bring up the Center for Guaranteed Income Research team, and that's going to be led by Dr. Amy Castro. Dr. Amy Castro is the founding director, and she will join us.
I just want to say it is such a joy to be here. We gave a shout out just a moment ago to Mayors for Guaranteed Income and Mayor Michael Tubbs. I worked on that project as well in Stockton, California. And one of the things that has been so extraordinary and exciting about watching this idea of unconditional cash and guaranteed income move across the United States is that's been led by public officials and it's been led on the local level. So at a point where science is kind of under attack, right? And we have some institutions that are crumbling a little bit, the cornerstone of Mayors for Guaranteed Income and the cornerstone of what Mayor Baraka has been doing is saying, we are going to lead in one hand with science and on the other hand with human rights and with dignity and with community. And it's just extraordinary and exciting to be here with you all this morning. Excuse me, I apologize. So I just wanted to set the stage for some terms that you know what it is that we're talking about this morning. And shout out to my two colleagues here, Nidhi Tandon, who's our data scientist, and Dr. DeYoung, who both co-author these reports with us. So just in terms of terms, right? We talk about this idea of guaranteed income. What guaranteed income is it's unconditional. It's cash that is no strings attached. You don't have to do anything to receive it. You receive it because you are human. So the logic of unconditional cash, the logic of guaranteed income is the exact opposite of the way that our safety net operates, which says you are only deserving of assistance if you perform behaviors that policymakers deem worthy. You are only sort of seen as deserving of aid if you are propping up capitalism in some particular way. The logic of this particular pilot and the logic of guaranteed income is the exact opposite. It's saying you matter because you are human. You matter because you have breath. You matter because you have life. You matter because you're here, not because of your citizenship status. So when we think about this idea of unconditional cash, it is untethered from the labor market, right? We care far more about how having the ability to pay one's bills impacts people's health, impacts people's well-being, impacts the relationships that they have, far more so than we're worried about things like, are they working more or less? So just to give a little snapshot of the project, and you can read more about it online, and of course we'll talk about this more in the panel. What Newark did here was really extraordinary, really different. So on the one hand, we see this proliferation of guaranteed income pilots happening all across the United States. There's been over 150 started since 2018 when Mayor Tubbs spearheaded the movement from Stockton. But there's only been 2 that have said, what would happen if we compared 2 different ways of distributing cash at the same time to sort of inform policymakers that we're actually making decisions based on data rather than ideology or conjecture. So we had 2 groups in this particular pilot. One where 200 people, that were receiving $250 biweekly for 2 years in unconditional cash. They did not have to do anything to receive it. Once they were enrolled into that treatment condition, which is receiving guaranteed income, they received it, that's it. The second group was a lump sum group. These folks, 200 of them as well, received $3,000 twice per year. That was mimicking sort of the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit. So we know from prior research that people engage with cash differently based on how it's distributed. Now, the policy logic behind guaranteed income and behind unconditional cash as a whole is really targeting this question of income volatility. So you all know this in this room, if you are living here in the United States, that we are experiencing tremendous economic risk. Since about 2015, 2016, we know that income volatility, or your money going up and down each month, continues to move up the income ladder in the average American household. And what happens when you're living in that constant state of income volatility, where you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from? It impacts your health and well-being. It impacts your ability to plan for the future, and it undermines the goal setting that you might have for yourself and for your kids. So the logic of guaranteed income is, if we smooth this income volatility, can we then free up space and possibility for people to set their own goals and their own kind of ideas about what it is to be economically mobile or what it is to show up as a parent or a partner? So here again, we are comparing recurring, so receiving that $250 a month, twice a week, right, for 2 years, versus the lump sum. I'm just going to go over a couple of these findings really quickly. So first, in the recurring payment group, we saw that people use the guaranteed income for really day-to-day expenses. And what this did was it allowed them to weather those shocks and that income volatility that I was just talking about, is that as that income volatility was smooth, people felt a reduction in stress. And this showed up at the 6-month mark pretty early. And we also saw real reductions in household chaos. So how many people in the room are a parent? Anybody? I don't think I need to tell you what the chaos scale measures. If you have children, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's only so much we can do with little ones, right? But we know that when we as parents are stressed out, or our schedules are unpredictable because we never know when we're getting the next shift at work, it creates a lot of disruption in the home. One of the things that we learned in this particular pilot, specifically with the recurring cash group, was that as that income volatility was smooth, parents reported having less chaos in the home. What that then translated into was being able to be more present for their kids and showing up for them in ways that they had always wanted to, but were often prevented by the market or prevented by the ways that their employers were scheduling them to work. In addition to that, we also saw that the guaranteed income relieved food insecurity. So if you live here in your local, you know that there are many places in this city that are categorized as a food desert. At the same time, we've been experiencing inflation, right? And this rise in the cost of living throughout the duration of this pilot. Yet, at the same time, we saw that in these households that were receiving recurring cash payments, an increase in food security. This is tremendous. It shows the capacity of people when they actually have cash in their hands. They know best what to do, how to make ends meet. The last thing I want to say about this particular group is the impact on kids. We know that kids who were in homes of the parents that were in the treatment group for the recurring cash were more likely to earn A grades than those that were in the control group. They were also more likely to enroll in AP courses. Now, key with the recurring cash group, we didn't see big changes in housing, right? So if you're only receiving $500 a month, we can't expect that to magically equal 3 months of rent, right? So if you're renting a home, what do you need? You need first month, last month deposit. Who can do that? I can't do that, and I'm a Penn professor, right? Like the amount of money it takes to secure housing is really, really high. So we saw in that recurring cash group, we didn't see big changes in people moving, but what we did see was an increased ability for people to able to pay their rent and pay it on time. Now, thinking about the lump sum group, these were folks who received 2 lump sum payments and infusions throughout the year. This is really similar to the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit. So we're talking about a big lump sum infusion of cash rather than those recurring payments. People reacted to these payments differently. As you might imagine, you're not necessarily, layering it right into your bills because you're receiving an infusion all at once. And the key takeaways from the lump sum group were that it allowed people, particularly parents, to act on goals that they'd held for a really long time. Things like actually purchasing furniture, being able to cobble together that lump sum payment with maybe funds from friends and family or combining funds with other folks and able to move up into a different sort of apartment or a better place to live. We also saw more likelihood to pay down debt and having more liquid savings. So people in that lump sum group, they didn't have the same changes as they did in the recurring group because, again, it was a big infusion of cash. But we did still see an increase in children's performance in schools as well with that group as well. A couple key takeaways, and we'll shift over to the panel. I think one of the things when I think about the findings in this particular report is that you can't automate away the role that parents play in raising their kids, right? So if you look at who is in this sample, we are talking by and large about Black moms. These are Black moms who are raising their kids against all odds, keeping the roof over their kids' head, keeping the lights on, increasing food security, and increasing educational attainment. So when we think about what the digital space is offering right now, what is the digital landscape saying? It's atomizing us, it's dividing us, right? It's saying if we just automate it, it'll be okay. What we saw in this pilot was that when moms were given the capacity, particularly Black moms, were given the capacity through cash to show up, they did not need us to tell them how to parent. They didn't need financial literacy classes. They didn't need parenting classes. They didn't need someone to tell them, hey, you know what? You should help your kids with your homework. They knew to do these things. They had these desires to show up for their kids, and they were structurally prevented from doing so. What unconditional cash and guaranteed income does is it puts power back in the hands of parents that the market steals away. So when we think about the sort of the ways in which this can spread across New Jersey, I mean, it's almost in a way kind of the sky's the limit. Now, there's some limits, right? Like, it's not going to solve the fact that we have an affordable housing crisis. It's not going to resolve the fact that we don't have a living wage all throughout the state. But what it does do is it provides this window of time that we hear over and over again from participants, allows them to show up and set their own goals. To say, I am the expert on my own life. I don't need a policymaker to tell me what it means to show up as a parent. I can stand on my own 2 feet, and I know well how to raise my kids. So I would provide quotes from these participants, but I think what would be far better is if you took a moment when we were done today and stepped over to the exhibits at the side and read some of the poetry that was created by them, hear their stories in their words. It speaks far more than the data ever can. Numbers can tell you what is happening with a person, but they can never tell you how or why, and really capture that lived experience. So with that, I'll close my comments. I apologize, my voice is a little bit shaky this morning. But just again, thank you so much to the city, to all the sort of foundations in the room and public servants that have lifted this project up. We work a lot on these different guaranteed income projects, and Newark is one of our favorites, not just because you're local, although that has a lot to do with it. But the other reason we have loved this project so much is that from its inception, this has been grounded in community. You're one of the only cities we've worked with that spent not 1, but I believe 2 years testing the idea, building up support with stakeholders, coalition building, going door to door, making sure folks weren't left out. What that says to me is that you're in this for the long haul. You're prioritizing your people, you're prioritizing your community in ways that are really groundbreaking. So I do think that this is really just the beginning for your state. And there's a lot more sort of groundswell of activity that's happening. Just want to thank you so much. And if I could just get everyone to say thank you to the public servants in the room that built this project up. For real. People often ask me, what does it take to get a program like this off the ground? Because it seems so simple, right? Policy or poverty by definition is lack of cash. Give people cash, they're not going to be poor anymore. Really simple. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that in terms of implementation. And this would not exist if it weren't for the people that were laboring behind the scenes as public servants for years, well before this pilot got off the ground. So just thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kevin. Yeah, so we'll take questions during the panel.
Great. So I'm going to bring up our panelists, and then we'll get started. So Dr. Castro will stay with us. Our second panelist is Kalina Berryman. So Kalina is a force, if you know her, and she helped us to manage this pilot from soup to nuts from the beginning. So we're very, very grateful to her. She helped make it possible, and she also took everyone's calls when they were asking where the pay cards were and all that kind of stuff. So we owe a big debt to her. And then we're going to bring up Peter Chen, who is a senior policy analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective. And I'm going to join you all as well. I need to... So while I get mic'd, I'll ask you all the first question, and then I'll get myself mic'd up so I can move over there. So the first question we wanted to ask, maybe we could start with Dr. Castro. I know you kind of reflected on this, but if you have any other thoughts, we just wanted you to reflect on the pilot in general, what you see as the most compelling takeaway, whether it's what's in the data, qualitative stories, you all could choose from your different perspectives, but what is the most compelling takeaway from the pilot?
So to me, the next obvious step is to say, if you're getting sort of this ability to kind of enact goals over here and see slow and steady change over here with recurring payments, what would then happen if we put them together? And that, I think, is the most compelling. Yeah, it might be better because I'm not shouting. Thank you. That, I think, is probably the most compelling thing when I think about this particular report and your site, is to say, what could this pilot look like 2.0 to the funders in the room? I'm sure you're here, right? In an ideal world, we'd love to see something where people were given a lump sum payment at the start to allow them to sort of jumpstart their goals and then receive recurring payments thereafter. Obviously, that's not what we studied in this particular pilot, but looking at the results of each, and you can see the strengths of each approach, it kind of begs the question, what would then happen if we put them together?
Great. Thank you. Kalina.
Oh my goodness. This project was by far among a favorite of mine. I also want to thank Yolanda Green, who was my co-program manager. Yes, let's give Yolanda a round of applause. We worked hard. And what was also unique about the Newark pilot was that we had pilot support specialists. Because for us, when people found out that they'd gotten this, they couldn't believe it. They hung up on us. They didn't trust us. And people cried picking up those cards, repeatedly saying, thank you, Mayor Baraka. Thank you, Mayor. So thank you, Mayor Baraka. You got like 400 of those. But they couldn't believe it because, as you pointed out, a lot of the participants were moms. And a lot of times, being a mom and a lot of single moms, you don't feel like anybody is looking out for you sometimes. And so it was a deeply personal project because it brought community so much closer to government. And they felt like their mayor and their city saw them, chose them. There's power in money, but there's a special power in being chosen, being seen, being selected. They felt special. They felt a part of an elite group. And we would say that to them, y'all are the elite, y'all are the chosen. And although it was random, that's how they felt. And our pilot support specialists, Alina, Amelie, Swia, Patricia, they each had 100 residents. And they would call them, and there were limits. We didn't mess up the research, so we couldn't be actual navigators to resources. But the idea that they could call someone in government and talk about challenges and talk about dreams. After like 6 months into the pilot, people would call and say, Swia, I'm thinking about going back to college. What can I do? Well, there's so much we can tell you, but Essex County has a program called call this number. And so it was just really special to see the power of community knowing exactly what their government, their leadership, their electeds have done for them, and the once you eliminate the stress, that people can begin to dream and envision the next step for themselves. So that was my biggest takeaway.
Thanks, Galena. That was great. I think I want to build on what you mentioned, which is what we're seeing now in this current political moment is the result of decades of cynicism about government that's been marketed and that's built as a political movement where you have, leaders in both parties talking about basically how much to cut government rather than whether there's a positive, whether there's a benefit, whether government can work for people. And I think we've seen that people with low incomes are giving into that cynicism to some degree, to saying like, why even bother with this? The government's not working for me. It's helping some other people. It's not helping me. And so what we can see from the qualitative data, from the quantitative data is, here's a way that government can directly help people in a way that they can feel, that's tangible to them. And I'll note that many of the negative narratives that have around people with low incomes were advanced by the Democratic Party in the mid-90s with welfare reform, right? Having work requirements, right? That's a Democratic invention. And so I think it's useful to now reshift our focus to think about what's the next 10 years, what's the next 20 years look like when thinking about how government can serve people and end poverty in this country by rejecting some of those prior narratives and move towards a place where government can serve people in a tangible way that they can feel, that they know that their government is looking out for them.
Great, thank you. So our second question is really going to focus on city-level initiatives like the Newark Movement for Economic Equity. And Peter, maybe I'll start with you because you have a statewide lens. How do you think what we're doing here can really help to inform state and national economic policy? How can we take what we've done here and really try to shift it statewide?
So I think one thing that we frequently hear when there's a pilot in some other state or some other place is we hear, okay, but we can't do that in New Jersey because blah, 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 blah. And so here we can say, this literally happened in New Jersey. It has occurred. We have the results from New Jersey residents and New Jersey families. Here's how good it was. And why can't we use that as a model for how to build a better state? Right? And I think one thing that we can look to, again, some of the current movements that are very harmful, like pushing work requirements on Medicaid or SNAP, those were all piloted in states, right? States and localities really piloted a lot of those, wicked, evil policies. And we have an opportunity to do the opposite, to say, let's look at a policy that has worked, that helps reduce poverty, that helps reduce want, that helps provide a vision of real economic freedom, and say to the legislature, say to lawmakers, this is something that we can build as a state, and we have done, and we should be building more of, rather than falling back on sort of the old tired narratives that have not worked.
And Peter, maybe, sorry to go back to you with the second question. I'm like, hold on, let me take this off here. But maybe you could talk a little bit about, so we worked with the New Jersey Policy Perspective about a year ago to develop statewide recommendations, not just on guaranteed income, but on a range of policies that are informed by guaranteed income. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that we made that are doable on a statewide level beyond guaranteed income.
Yeah, sure. So there are already some programs that provide direct cash support to families. There's sort of there's TANF, right? Work First New Jersey, the formerly welfare cash assistance programs. And we have proposals that can reform that program to remove some of the red tape, remove some of the strings attached, and make it easier for people to access. New Jersey is one of the lowest performing states in the country in terms of what percentage of our federal TANF dollars we actually spend on cash assistance. Because the barriers are so high, people don't even bother to apply. We also have the child tax credit and earned income tax credit. These are state tax credits, some of which earned income is based on the federal, child tax credit is not, but each of them provide cash directly to families as part of their tax filing every year. That's more like your lump sum kind of payments, whereas TANF is regular. And then, so expanding those programs could be a first step, right? to putting more cash in families' pockets and learning some of the policy lessons of guaranteed income without saying, okay, here's a brand new expansive guaranteed income program. There are also additional sort of administrative and boring bureaucratic steps that are necessary to help smooth the path towards guaranteed income. A lot of this is around ensuring that people still continue to qualify for other programs that are income qualified. And many of these programs are federal, and some of them require federal sign-off. Some of them, the feds allow states to determine eligibility and determine what counts as income for certain reasons. So this is a big issue, particularly with recurring payments. And that's somewhere where the state would have to, have a task force to look at all the different rules and all the different programs to identify where they could provide flexibility. Now, some of that, again, the pilot was really helpful for seeing, like, here's how the state can do this. They did provide exemptions and, waivers for a variety of these for direct payments. And that's sort of laying the groundwork for a future program to come, right? And there's also a possibility of trying to roll out more targeted kinds of approaches. Maybe the state could seed money for additional pilots in different geographic areas. I'm sure that this program would have to be structured differently in Cumberland County or Salem County, which are the highest poverty counties in New Jersey, but are rural, they're spread out. Whereas providing these in, let's say, Patterson, which has pilot right now and has, one of the most diverse language and nationality sort of communities, it's a very different, profile of how you get those funds out, how you build trust with communities, et cetera. But another idea is to focus on particular populations. We could say children who are born in New Jersey whose parents receive Medicaid or whose birth was covered by Medicaid, they start getting enrolled in a program. So it's targeted towards a particular population, or let's say foster care aging out, youth aging out of foster care, right? Which is a particular population. It's relatively small, but we know that this group faces serious obstacles to, economic freedom and security. And they're a group that the state has identified, right? Like they're already enrolled in a state system. So enrolling them in a recurring payment system might be straightforward. So I think in the long term, thinking like, how do we get towards a guaranteed income program at the state level? Look, that's a big ask and it's a long-term view, right? Even a relatively modest guaranteed income program at the state level with a relatively strict income cap, we're talking about $10 billion, right? In a state budget that's not even $60 billion. So thinking about how we get there, though, I think it's important to look at the cash assistance programs that exist and try to build those out and lay the groundwork for a broader program to come.
Great, thank you. Dr. Castro, I'd love to ask you about this, especially because you have a national lens. If you could talk about how you've seen this play out in other places, other states, how they've worked on this.
Yeah, so how sort of guaranteed income is rolling out. Yeah, I mean, we've seen tremendous momentum. I think, when guaranteed income we think about it in research terms as the quote unquote third wave. And so it feels like it kind of came out of nowhere with the Yang campaign, right? But it didn't. The idea of unconditional cash has its roots in the birth of democracy. Thomas Paine first wrote about it at the founding of our country. It is this idea that part of the social contract means showing up for one's neighbor is part of what it means to be an American. And we've been writing about this since the very beginning, and just now we're kind of seeing this roll out. Now, one of the things that's been really exciting is that as this momentum is built up, it sort of started on the coast, right, in California, or Chicago was another place that had really kind of a big pilot, big findings, things like this. But at the same time, guaranteed income has to be rooted in community. So the places that we've seen cash really take off well are the ones where the program is developed with community in mind. So, on the one hand, yes, we need policy change at the federal level to change some things about waivers to make sure that people aren't, for instance, losing their Section 8 housing voucher or losing SNAP benefits when they're enrolled in a guaranteed income program. Those are really important policy things that we have to keep our eye on that Peter's office does a great job at doing. But by the same token, it also takes a groundedness and a rootedness in knowing a community and knowing who best the messengers are to build out the program and implement the pilot, which is why my colleague here is so good at what she does, right? Because we know that what's happening right now in the United States has to do with the erosion of trust. And so if you are somebody who has been experiencing marginalization throughout your lifespan, or you are from a family that has struggled with lack of mobility over generations, why should you trust the government? Why? Right? Why? There's literally no reason. If you have been marginalized over and over and over again, right, people start to lose trust. But the thing that guaranteed income programs do well, the ones that really kind of we see take off and really are structured really well, are the ones that are rooted in community. And what I mean by that is it's representing the opposite of what the market is saying. So the market is saying to people, you don't matter, right? And then she comes along and is like, no, you really do matter to our city, you matter to our people. So when we think about the places where it's really taking off, again, it comes back to that thing where it's like, yes, one arm on the science, one arm, or one hand, on that policy lever, but then the other really has to stay grounded in community. It's not about kind of building out the perfect plane, building out the perfect policy, because there's always going to be snags and snafus and things like that. But by and large, the programs we've seen across the entire country that have gone best are the ones that are rooted in the stakeholders and who have always been here and will continue to be here long after the pilot ends.
And I'd like to add something. So on brand, I want to highlight, while the pilot the research project may not have highlighted this particular cohort, I believe that the power of programs like guaranteed income for young people, age 18 to 24, 30, is transformational. What we saw from that group was that they used that money to start businesses. They used that money to pay for college, to go to school, to pay for books. One of our participants used that money to gain housing. She was homeless. Another participant, a young man in the pilot, used that money for transportation to and from mental health resources, which allowed him to keep his job and stay in school. And so those, I find that what I hope that we change as we move forward is that after young people graduate from high school, you're kind of left to whatever you decide in life, and there's not really a cushion for support. And so if I were ever to champion for expansion of guaranteed income, it would really focus on that population and how we can allow them the resources and then a connection to all the other supports that are in this room to start to lay a better foundation for their life, which could eliminate a lot of the struggles to come. So, I don't know if we have any way to do that, but to really talk to that group and find out what we can learn from them.
And Colleen, I'm going to stay with you actually, because I'd love for you to talk about, if there are one or two stories, you sort of went into it with young people, but what this really looked like on the ground, what this looked like to kind of build this program on the ground, but then also if there are one or two stories that you would really like to highlight or things that you thought were really amazing that people participated in the pilot.
Yeah, and I hope none of them will get us in trouble from a research standpoint, but...
No, it's fine.
Okay, good, because it's over now, right? All right, so one was when we were providing the cards, when people were coming, Yolanda and I and team, and they were coming down to pick up the cards and still not really believing because of the lack of red tape. There was no red tape. You didn't have to be extremely poor. You could be 200% over the poverty line. So people were making like 20, maybe $1 an hour was the max. So they would get there and they would be like, what's the catch? And we say, there is no catch. And then they would cry. And I remember one mom said that her son, who was a Newark High School graduate, had been paralyzed in a car accident. And she couldn't work because she was caring for him. And that this money was such a blessing for her to be able to help fit their home for his needs. We had another older woman who was recovering from cancer and had lost her job. And it was like, how did y'all know that I needed this so deeply? We had a resident who was a part of the pilot, and that whole connection to government. She was about to be evicted or something was happening with her rent. And she needed her lump sum earlier. And it was like a week or two. It wasn't a big difference. But I believe, I don't remember how we helped her to solve that problem, but we reached out to Kevin. And, Kevin was like, look, we can call housing. And we were able to navigate a solution for her to be able to keep her housing. And then the storytelling cohort, Emil is here, one of our storytellers. Jenny Marie is here, one of our storytellers. That fellowship was such a beautiful experience, studied poetry, photography. And we got to meet George Miles, who was featured in the video. George Miles used that money. He was a veteran, and he used that money to, stabilize, support his family, to start a sneaker business, I think custom sneaker cleaning. And he recently passed away about a month ago. And when I saw it and I shared it on social media, a lot of us who were part of the pilot or part of the storytellers, we were heartbroken because we really got to know George. And he was such a champion for the program. But those are the things we saw. And my last thing is what I appreciated that Mayor Baraka told the residents was there was this idea that they had to be really good stewards of the money. Sometimes they would call and they would say how, they would kind of talk to us about what they were thinking to do with it. And we would say, that's not a part, you don't have to think about that. Like, do whatever you need to do. But they really wanted to be good stewards of this money. And wait, where was I going with that? There was some, Mayor Baraka told the residents, use it to enjoy your family. Use it to go on vacation. Use it to bring joy to your children. Use it to relax. Mom, one time, go and have a spa day. This is not just about feeling like you have to just solve the problems of your world. We want you to use this however you need, because he understands, and we understood as a city, that that's important too. Rest is important. Joy is important. Kids do better when they go on vacation. And when he gave permission for that, I saw a lot of kind of like, and we were in a meeting, but a lot of kind of like, okay, all right, that's cool. And residents began to do that. So, those were just some of the highlights, and it was just great. We felt like Oprah, you get a car, you get a car. It was so great to be a part of something that was so seamless, where people just had to exist to do it. So, and I also want to shout out Jessica for her. It was a team of people who really love our city, love our community, and did this work with their heart, and I think that makes the difference too.
Kevin, I'm going to hijack for 1 second.
Go for it.
I just want to highlight something that's underneath everything you were just saying. So you asked me a moment ago, what are we seeing across the country? And you'll notice in your remarks, you kept saying over and over again, this person said this to me, this person would call me and say this person would email me and say this. But do you catch what's happening there? Every single time a participant in either treatment or control needed to reach a human being, they reached a human being. They didn't get a bot. They didn't get an automated phone line. They didn't wait in line on hold in perpetuity when they're desperate, right? And so it's these simple things, right? That human connection, that democratization of human contact, that is in many cases the secret sauce that gets these programs off the ground. So I just want to say thank you for that. And you have no idea the power of showing up. So that when you are somebody who is constantly seeking help or even just wanting to connect, right? The fact that you can pick up the phone and call the people that are running the program and actually hear a human being, that's how you know it's not a scam. That is the way that we reknit trust in government. That is the way that we reknit trust in our institutions.
So to build on that, I agree entirely. And I think one thing that unfortunately is part of some of the guaranteed income and universal basic income conversation is, oh, this is great. Now we don't need as much government. We can send people checks and we can shrink the size of government. This is like the Milton Friedman version of universal basic income. But that's not how these programs work effectively. And what we've seen is starving government makes people trust government less, right? Like, people complain about the lines at motor vehicle. Well, why do you think there's a line at motor vehicle? It's because there's not enough people. New Jersey state government has fewer people working for it now than it did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We have millions more people in the state, and we have fewer people, right? So I think what we have to be careful around the narratives of this helps lift people out of poverty. Yes, but also that doesn't mean you get to stop doing the parts of government that make it work. But something else I want to build on here is something that has brought us to our current moment is that they took the word freedom from us, right? They took the word freedom and they say freedom means the freedom to starve, right? It means the freedom to pollute, the freedom to, those are the freedoms that word means. And what we see in these stories is this is what freedom is. The freedom to not have to worry about where, how you're going to put food on the table for your kid for the next day. There was when we were trying to get support for child tax credit, There were a lot of stories that were coming in of how people had spent the money. There's one story, and then when we told it, it really, the lawmakers we talked to, it stuck with them, which is a mom who had never had a birthday party for her 9-year-old. And she had a birthday party for her 9-year-old. And, like the ability to do that, the freedom to go and start a business and not worry about, if I lose that money, I'm going to be out on the street, right? The freedom to have a birthday party for your child. Like, that's the freedom that we need to be able to attach to this kind of work. This is what, FDR would have called freedom from want, right? That when we can provide that freedom, and what we see in social democratic countries around the world that have something closer to what basic income is, they have higher entrepreneurship rates, right? They have, because you're more likely to start a business if you don't have to worry about losing your health insurance, right? So I think that's something that we have to think about when we build these narratives. What we're providing with guaranteed income is freedom, is a release from the daily pressures of the roller coaster of volatile incomes, of not knowing whether you can pay your rent, of the stress, the chronic toxic stress that puts on your life, on your kids' lives, on your grandkids' lives. That's the freedom that we can sell. And I think that's part of what this program really provides in a way that's different from prior programs.
Great, thank you. So with that, we'll take some questions. If anybody had any general questions about the pilot. I see Jenny Marie raising your hand. Go ahead, go for it.
Hello everyone, I'm Jenny Marie Drobo. So the question, I was writing a couple questions, I'm gonna hit just one question. Based on the climate we're living in with administration, what risks, if you see any, do you see in how the guaranteed income data could be weaponized or misunderstood by politicians or the media? And this goes for anyone.
That's such a good question. I think Peter was alluding to this just a moment ago, is that, there's long been support on both the right and the left for the idea of universal basic income, and unconditional cash. But sometimes the motivations vary by group. And so there is a stream of folks out there that say we should eliminate the safety net entirely and replace it with guaranteed income, right? So that was Andrew Yang's platform, several years ago when he was running for president. The problem with that is math. If we were to sort of eliminate the entire safety net, Medicaid, SNAP, Section 8 housing voucher, I could just go on and on and on. It does not equal $500 a month or $1,000 a month, right? And so there are certainly lessons that we can learn in terms of efficiency, making things run more smoothly, sort of having that optimum amount of return on investment for staffing in these programs that can really inform the way that we implement safety net programs. But one way that it can be misconstrued is people kind of taking the data and saying, see, look, this version's better, it means we need to replace this. One thing I neglected to say at the beginning of my remarks is that one of the things that's really unique about the idea of guaranteed income specifically is it's designed to work alongside the safety net, not in place of it. So, these programs are carefully set up to make sure that when you are receiving a guaranteed income, you ought not to also be losing your housing supports, right? Your child care supports, those other things. So it's designed to work in concert with these other programs, not in place of it. So that, I think, is probably the biggest risk that I can see.
I think what's always really helpful in framing is just really being clear about this is an income floor, right? Like, nobody ever came to us and said, I'm going to leave my job now because I'm getting $500 a month. Like, again, it's math, right? The math doesn't work, that you're getting $6,000 a year, so you're going to stop working. So I think really making clear that this is an income floor, that this is what we talked about. This is to make people a little more mentally healthy, have less household chaos, allow them to raise their kids in a healthy environment, which is good for all of us and benefits all of us in a lot of ways. And so, I think the more we can message it that way, along with this message of sort of this freedom that Peter talked about, I think is really important. And I think we see that, even in some openness to things like the child tax credit. And when you really start to talk to people about what exactly the child tax credit is, which is putting money into people's pockets. But I think it is a great question, because I think this is something that's very easy to weaponize. And every time we post about this or announce something about this, there's always the people in the comments, saying ridiculous things.
Kevin, didn't anyone tell you not to read the
I know.
comments? Don't read the comments, Kevin.
Right, exactly. You don't read the comments.
Ignore the comments.
But I think that we do need to be very clear about what this is and what it isn't, and I think that helps. Mary, you have a question.
I'm Mary Ellis. I'm the CEO of the United Way of Passaic County and was on the task force for the Guaranteed Income Pilot in Patterson. And United Ways talk a lot about ALICE data, which is essentially working poor data in Passaic. In cities like Patterson and Passaic, almost 70% of individuals can't meet basic needs. So it's very high. It might even be higher than Newark. But, so I'm a huge proponent, right, of this, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. And so kind of wanted to get to the question around, I know there are pathways to get there in the state. And I'm wondering if either in New Jersey or other places around the country, there's been an analysis around economic impact. In other words, making a case to legislators around the cost savings, if you will. In other words, if this were to be implemented, what would the economic benefit be, right? The cost savings, essentially, because it increases things like ratables. You have all of the social ills are expensive. Poverty is expensive. The cost of eviction is expensive. And was on I was on a board in New York City that looked at the right to counsel in a housing court. And they made the case that it actually would cost the city less money to fund this program versus the cost of eviction. So,
That's such a good question. It is not something we have the answer to yet, but it is something we're actively working on. Nidhi Tandon, can you raise your hand? Nidhi is our data scientist, and she's actively working on this. So I'd encourage you to talk to her one-on-one afterwards.
So something I'd mention is that almost every program, though, where cash is going directly to households, particularly low and moderate income households, shows that there's a huge economic stimulative effect locally, right? Because they're going to the store and they're buying stuff and injecting that money right back into the local economy. And so that's one area where it's clear that these programs have direct economic benefits. I think the tricky thing, and look, we've seen this with preschool, we've seen this with other areas, is when you start going into, let's say, reduction in child welfare caseloads, right? Or reduction in emergency room visits, which, from some of the data around guaranteed income, we can extrapolate. It starts to get shaky, and it also starts to get into, it starts getting into shakier territory, particularly about overselling them, but also about the kind of implication that has. And I think one important thing is this. We want to make sure that we implement these programs not to save money. Part of the reason we're in this position in the first place is because we're in this constant efficiency mindset when it comes to the function of government. Let's put in more red tape, more whatever, because we got to make sure that the right people get it, that we're not, that we're making sure we maximize the economic benefit. And I think we can get trapped by that. It's not to say that there aren't economic benefits, because I think it's pretty clear from almost every kind of direct cash benefit program analysis that there is. But I don't think we want to lean on that too hard, because some of the benefits are going to be so down the road. I mean, what we've seen in stuff like the Alaska Permanent Fund research, or if we look at some of the casino payment, data, those benefits don't come until 30 years later. Well, the current legislature doesn't care about what happens in 30 years because they won't be there. So I think that's something where we want to be careful. It's not to say that this doesn't have long-term societal economic benefits, just to say that they might come in your kids' generation, and how, that's so far down the road as to be almost intangible.
We have been conducting a door-to-door survey in Camden about what people know about basic income. So we didn't have money to do a pilot, but I sort of feel like we need to move on from the pilots, because the pilots keep showing us the positive effects of it, but it raises a question, and this has come up in the survey, about what happens after it's over. And all of these pilots are just pilots. They're 2 years or some short period of time. And I'm wondering if researchers or if others know what happens after it ends. What happens to the folks who no longer get the money? Is there a sustaining effect of some way, or do we have research on the end of the pilot and what it looks like and what the implications are?
Well, I mean, I can only speak to, the end of our pilot, and it was sad, because folks were dependent on or looking forward to those funds, and they had begun to count it in their budgeting. So it was a big deal when when the program was ending. However, I think that if a program such as Guaranteed Income is partnered with helping all the other resources of a community, then the goal of it should be that we are providing this additional money and also connecting you to all of the other things that you need in order to improve your life so that there is an end. Because if people are able to obtain a better job, get a credential, go back to school, start a business, if their kids are doing better educationally, if you're able to help people improve their health, to learn how to save, whatever that plan is, then the end is okay because I no longer need this. So, I think it's very important that programs like this are partnered very closely with coordinated resources that begin to help people to navigate their future. We see that now in our work with young people post-secondary. We're saying we need to have a plan for your life, and we need to introduce you to all the various resources that are available. People don't know what's available in our communities. I can't talk statewide because that's a bigger picture, but in Newark, we are resource rich, they are often says, and coordination poor. So what if you couple a program like this with the BRIC resources, the resources at United Way, all of these things that you have to usually have access to government to know about. We always see the same people in all the opportunities because they have this access to government. They have access to people who are the not gatekeepers, but the community storytellers who let folks know what's happening. So I think that is the only way an end makes sense. My life has been improved because of access to people who had access to resources that I could utilize. And the money just helps you to stabilize your life in order to take advantage of those resources.
I guess I just add that we do have some research around short-term cash infusions. We're seeing some of this with child tax credit. Obviously, the poverty rate was cut in half and then went right back, right? But what we've seen in often in disaster relief or other times when there's short-term stimulus, we can see that these dollars often provide a buffer against other kinds of, even for those 2 years. 2 years in the life of a child, preventing the family from going into additional debt, preventing them from potentially being evicted for those 2 years. They really do matter and oftentimes show up in longer term sort of research. And so I agree with you on the time for pilots to prove the proof of concept here is over. I do think there is space for pilots around particular populations that might be hard to reach. Thinking again, youth aging out of foster care is a great example of this is a population that we know has unique needs, that the state has contact with, that has and where the cash can really make a difference in terms of their long-term educational and economic outcomes. Or thinking about populations who don't speak English, populations who are rural areas where it's harder to, right? I think there are still spaces for us to think about program delivery in those areas because look, guaranteed income is not going to happen tomorrow, right? For our state. But having all of the knowledge of how these programs, how to implement the program so that when we do get one, that it can work from day one, I think that's still knowledge that's important to gather.
Time for maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Danielle's had her hand up for a while.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So Peter, you mentioned the stimulus, and I remember in the beginning conversations about the pilot, one of the things we were wondering about was that this was happening at the same time of those stimulus payments and trying to work through how to evaluate and tease that out, if any. And I'm just curious, how did you deal with that, the two infusions of cash with the same population at the same time. 2020 and 2021 were the two payments.
Our pilot might have come just after the stimulus payments.
So it
but
actually started after that.
Yeah.
Did you get any benefits then that carried through? Like,
Yeah, so good question. One of the thorny issues with studying guaranteed income right now is that this massive expansion really happened from 2020 onward, right? So pandemic. So it wasn't just stimulus payments, it was expansion in unemployment, supports, expansion in SNAP, sort of our safety net buffers that happen at the federal level and also locally. So it is difficult at times to kind of disentangle treatment effects of multiple types of cash happening at the same time. Without getting too nerdy on you, and we can talk about this more afterwards, and of course, Nidhi's here as well. One of the things that we've been doing in our center is using common methodology across all of our experiments. So we're now at this point where in this next phase of work, it's going to be answering some of these more targeted questions so we're able to disentangle what happens when unconditional cash is provided in varying types of policy subsystems with different types of resources, right? So, we know, and I've been hammering all day about community, but not every community has resources to connect people to, right? And so we know that cash works differently depending on ecosystems. So this is part of these unanswered questions that we have that we really need to tackle. Second thing I'll say about that is that there's a lot of promise in terms of thinking about timing, right? So the places where we see people, particularly in this pilot, move from kind of, okay, I'm surviving, but I'm not sure what's going to happen at the end, to people that kind of had a bump or some movement, were folks that were able to kind of use the cash to leverage waiting lists on other programs, right? So we can't expect guaranteed income and philanthropy to hold up the lack of a living wage in perpetuity, right? It is not the responsibility of funders forever to make up for the fact that people are working their tails off and they can't keep a roof over their head. That's a problem. What guaranteed income is supposed to do is to serve as this kind of short-term infusion that connects them to other things. So that's really the next phase of the work, is saying, okay, we have these other policy supports happening, be it expansion in SNAP or not, or expansion in unemployment insurance or not, right? Alongside other investments on the local level that just take time. The beauty of cash is that it's fast, right? So if you're in, a disaster, you're on the brink of eviction, you have an emergency, you don't have time to go through an application process and enroll. Programs take time. Even the best programs take time. But the beauty of cash is that it's quick. So it allows people to quickly kind of stabilize their household while it gives time for some of these other resources to catch up. So it's kind of a two-part thing. Like on the one hand, we need to continue to build up our local systems. And then on the other, disentangle some of these questions. Okay, what's actually creating the change? How much of it is the guaranteed income? How much of it are other policy supports? And that's really crucial questions that we need to get at in this next phase of research to make sure that the money is being used in such a way that it's actually pushing people towards mobility, and we're not just kind of with conjecture trying the same thing with everybody.
Okay, we have one more question.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm a big fan of everybody up there and the incredible work that's happened right here in Newark to be proud of. You spoke to it in different ways, particularly as it relates to the experience of the participants, but my question is more of like a call to action to us, right, who care about this kind of work. Freedoms, social safety nets, all under attack. Like, how do we make the case for this kind of investment in a way that doesn't further that narrative that this becomes like a lifelong crutch that we're putting people on? Like, how do we talk about the upward mobility of these investments, that it's a temporary help to help people kind of get to that next level to really make the case for this to be continued?
We have to marry guaranteed income with guaranteed empowerment. Guaranteed income with guaranteed empowerment. That has to be the design. It has to work together. So one of the things when we were ending the pilot, and even in some of my work with the Abbott Leadership Institute and now with Newark Youth Career Pathways, is we know that financial help plus empowerment is what's transformational. So how can we as nonprofit leaders and systems leaders, when we design the things that we do, ensure that we're providing financial resources to those we serve in addition to the empowerment that we offer? To me, that's the only way. And so that's one thing that we can do, is to start to kind of redesign our work and think about what are people's financial needs, how can we empower them, and then determining what that empowerment means for them. Is it education? Is it workforce? And we've seen it. We've seen it in all of our work. We have helped to elevate our neighbors. We've helped to elevate ourselves just by someone giving us a slightly better job and some new skills, some new connections. That's the formula. So, as all of us go out into this work, I hope that those of us that run nonprofits or have different kind of service organizations, until the world catches up and makes guaranteed income, basic income a thing, we can build that into the work that we do and make sure that as people are coming to us for services, that we are finding ways to hire them, pay them, provide stipends, and things like that. And the short-term financial help goes a long way when it's coupled with empowerment.
So nobody talks about the mortgage interest tax deduction as welfare, right? Nobody talks about the farm subsidies as welfare. Nobody talks about the deductibility of 529, the tax deductibility of 529 contributions as welfare. But it is. It's a government subsidy.
And what if people become dependent on it?
Yeah, exactly, right? Nobody talks about this crutch that people have for their lifetime of Social Security, right? Like, that's not something that we do because we understand that as a society, we take on a duty to help each other. And I think pushing back on that narrative every time it pops up is really important. To say, again, this goes back to this question of freedom. You may think of yourself as, yeah, I'm the lone rugged individualist out there, hoofing it, working the land on my own. You're not, okay? We are all dependent on each other. And that's not a bad thing. We're all dependent on each other. That's good. I'm dependent on my kid's teacher. I'm dependent on my in-laws. We're all dependent on each other. And that's good. And I think fighting back on this zero-sum narrative that someone else is getting something for free, that's bad. I must be losing out. You're not losing out, right? I think we have to take back some of these narrative arcs, and especially for folks who have been, I don't want to financial literacy is good, and I'm glad that people learn about bank accounts, but there's often this mythos of we have to help people pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And it's well, maybe we need to make sure everyone has boots. Maybe we need to make sure that people have the basics that they need to get by. And it's not, and again, even this conversation around let's make this short term. I don't think it should be short term, right? I think the idea that every person in the richest country in the history of the world should be able to not starve, should be able to not go without a roof over their head, is not a revolutionary concept. And it's something that most people probably agree with. So I think there's I know you're being, you're playing the devil's advocate here a little bit, Katim, which I appreciate, but as somebody who does that for a living. But I think we need to be forceful in the positive vision that we have for this. This is not something that you need because something bad has happened. It's something that we all should be able to have, right? Rich kids have a safety net, right? And we don't think of that as a subsidy, but it often has been subsidized by whatever, all of the largesse of government for as long as there's been government, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind when thinking about that question.
So thank you so much to our amazing panelists. And I am going to bring up Jessica to close us out with some next steps.
Thank you all so much. Kevin, I'm going to steal the bootstrap idea. I think you ate with that one. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being here. I am so grateful to be here, and I get really emotional when I think about this project because I was raised here in the city of Newark by a single mother myself. And so I deeply understand what a program like this can mean and what it can do for families. This pilot, as we've all heard today, solidified what we already know, which is simple and backed by evidence. That unrestricted direct cash works. It's a proven strategy to alleviate poverty. Cash gives people the freedom and the dignity of choice and self-determination. And while the Newark Movement for Economic Equity pilot is over, the work and the movement is not. So today we implore you all to act now. And there are several ways that you can continue the work. I invite you all to visit our website, newjerseyequity.org, where you can sign the petition and urge your elected leaders to continue to push for unrestricted cash policy programs and policies. There's also a policy brief that we partnered with Peter on, and so you can read that policy brief on there as well. There are also a few conversations and events happening in the city for those of you that asked about how you can continue to be part of this important movement. There's a conference that's being hosted by the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers tomorrow, Stronger Together Philanthropy and Civic Engagements Conference. There's a conference that New Jersey Policy Perspective is putting on in September, Progress 2024, and a conversation happening on Juneteenth called The Nowness of Reparations for Black People in New Jersey, hosted by the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. As we stress, these are not just events, they are opportunities to listen, learn, engage, and continue this movement forward. As you leave, there is a sign-up sheet in the back and also a sign-up sheet by the check-in table by the elevators for you to sign up if you're interested in joining a coalition. So once again, thank you all so much for being here and have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh, if you missed the exhibitions, they are still open. We have the poems by the storytellers, photos, and the documentary. Thank you.